Hello orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to talk about winter rest for two types of orchids. One is the Catasetum type orchid, and the other type is Dendrobium orchids that require winter rest. Right now in my collection, I have 3 Catasetum type orchids. I used to have 4, but one of them had bacterial infection. So the whole thing went really bad and I didn't want to take any risk, so I actually threw that one away. So I've had these orchids for a little bit over a year, and one of them actually bloomed in 2018, and I have created a video. Hopefully you have seen it. It's very dark. It's called Dragon Glade, I believe. So coming up, you're gonna see an older video clip of these Catasetum orchid when they were shedding their leaves last year. So last cycle, not this coming one, but last one. And at the time I had my windows open because that was the time that the weather started to cool down, and I had my windows open because I want my other orchids like Phalaenopsis orchid to be able to sense that cool down. And also just to have better ventilation, because I usually have these windows closed and I would set my central air conditioning to a certain temperature so that my growth space is pretty constant in terms of temperature. Humidity sometimes varies, and I do have a humidifier to help with that. But that's only when I'm around. When I go on business trips or when I'm traveling for pleasure, then it kind of just depends on whatever the humidity that the environment would have, then that has to be it. So for this type of orchid, it's normal for its leaves to start yellow in the late fall, beginning of winter, because this kind of orchid really requires winter rest, and that really just means that they will fall off all their leaves, like what you're seeing here, and during this winter rest they really don't need a whole lot of water, if at all. And what I did was about around mid-December 2017 I stopped watering, and then beginning of 2018 I started to see small growth coming out of the base. But again, that's still not the time to water, because you really want the new growth to be big enough. And by big enough, based on my study and some of the experiences shared by other YouTubers, they're saying that the leaf needs to be big enough to start growing out, its leaves, and it has to have enough roots, and that means at least 3 roots that are at least 2 to 3 inches long. That's when you can start watering. But if you want to repot this kind of orchid, then probably when it is starting to grow roots, you need to start thinking about, the possibility of repotting, because otherwise if you do it too late, the roots have grown so long, you may just simply damage the root and set back the orchid if you do repot at that time. So going into winter rest doesn't really mean that you stop watering all of a sudden. You gradually reduce the amount and frequency of watering for this kind of orchid, and then as it gradually comes out of dormancy, then you also need to gradually increase the water amount and or frequency depending on how far along it is out of the dormancy period. So be really careful. This kind of orchid shed their leaves and it needs a dormant period in winter. Don't be like my friends who thought he killed his Catasetum orchids in winter because they were out of leaves and he basically threw them away because he thought he killed these orchids, and that was such a pity, such a waste, because he didn't do his homework to know that this kind of orchid naturally shed leaves in winter time because of the dormancy, the need to dormant. So I think what I've said above sort of set the stage for the general winter care for this type of orchid. So now let's start taking a look at what these orchids look like toward the end of 2018 and beginning of 2019, right? So I only have 3, and I typically put them at the very top of my growing rack, hence the angle of this particular photo looking at my orchid from down below, because they're on top of the growing rack on the very top level. So end of 2018, one orchid started to lose its leaf, and pretty soon, within really just a matter of maybe 2 weeks, all the leaves were pretty much gone. And that was the time that I gradually reduced watering, and I believe beginning of January 2019, I didn't even water these orchids at all, because I know that if I somehow overwater, the pseudobulbs will rot, because at this time they really don't need a lot of water, especially if pseudobulb is plumped with water in it, and because they don't have leaves, they're not really doing a lot of photosynthesis, they're not really evaporating through their leaves, they're really just sleeping. Okay, so around mid-February 2019, I noticed that two of them are starting to have new growth coming out of the base. But remember, this is still not the time to begin watering, because the growth is so small and it doesn't have any roots. So what we need to do is to wait until the new growth is big enough. And up next, we start looking at my Dendrobium orchids. So this one was more of a project, and I thought this one was a goner, but you know, May 2018 it started to continue to grow, so I decided to keep it. And this one also require a winter rest. I believe this one is even a species. I just can't remember the name of it. I have to look at the tag. But beginning 2019, end of January, it has shed all its leaves, so it's just a bare cane at the moment. So I'm gonna stop watering. Occasionally I may use a sprayer and just spray it down, like with 1 or 2 spray, just so that it has some moisture, but otherwise I'm gonna just leave it be until it somehow, you know, grow more new growth, right? It has to perform in order for me to water it, otherwise I'm just gonna leave it alone. And here's another orchid by end of January 2019. It has already browned up all its leaves, and it was just looking very brown, very sad, but it's dormant, it's sleeping, so it's not dead. And I'm not worried. So there are a couple different type of dendrobiums. Well, but if you just look at category-wise in terms of winter rest, there are obviously 2 types. One that requires winter rest, and the other type that doesn't require winter rest. And for Dendrobium phalaenopsis, it's still a dendrobium orchid, but that's the type that doesn't sleep in winter. It would retain its green leaf all year around. But for orchids that would have leaf drop in winter, in fall, in winter time, they really need dormancy period. So you need to gradually reduce the watering, but then as it comes out of dormant period, then you want to gradually increase the water as well as watering frequency, because it will be in active growth. And when they're in active growth, it's important to give them enough feed, because that way their new growth would be taller, thicker, because otherwise they may grow very skinny. And here are my 2 other Dendrobium orchids that require much colder conditions, so I actually put them by the windowsill, on the windowsill, in hopes that it will be cold enough for them, that they'll do well and hopefully give me some bloom soon. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!